I had also known that you've done some studies on trying to understand the brains of politicians and powerful people, and dictators
Yeah.
especially. I had read some study um, that it showed that the brains of people who held on to power for a long period of time almost exhibited signs of like brain damage. Their frontal lobe was shrunk, um, poor impulse control. Do you think that a lot of problems in our politics are just because people aren't respecting the limits of the human brain?
Well, I've given a number of talks in Europe and in Russia and the United States and in Asia on dictators. I've done a series on Putin and other people, and gave a talk. Oh God, it was about 10 years ago on the brains of dictators, and I looked through dictators where I could get everything on their life that I could. So those that I had a lot of information on their life to just kind of put together their upbringing. Every one of them, every one of them was abused or abandoned in the first few years of life, including Putin. The only one that said that he was never had any problem was Pol Pot. He's the only one out of hundreds and hundreds that I looked at. But at any rate, uh, it's partially a mix of things. That is, when you talk about brain damage, that loss of control of the frontal lobe, um, that can be done by damage or by epigenetic changes in the connections of the emotional brain with the thinking brain, because they have certain genetics that predispose you to that and to psychopathy, for example. And if you have those genes and you're abused or abandoned in the first few years of life, it's big trouble. Uh, you can't, here's the, there's some caveats here. First of all, you can't analyze or you can't diagnose somebody by looking at their, reading about them or looking at their talks or everything. You have to have a qualified psychologist or psychiatrist who's an expert in personality disorders sit down with them for several days and do these structured and unstructured psych exams by an expert. A lot of people, a lot of times it's not done, even in prison, by experts. And so these are almost always, non-existent. For the key murders and certainly dictators. There was one who was the butcher of Belgrade that I had given a talk at the House of Commons meeting in London, and in that I gave a talk, and his attorneys came up to me, and the big haired guy, Radovan, and and so they wanted me to do an hour show that he would test him, do the genetics, and we'd have him psychiatrically. He's a psychiatrist, by the way, tested, and to see if he was a psychopath or anything. And they got back to me, and he goes, that Fallon's a son of a bitch. He's a psychopath. I can't trust him. And this guy is like the first person since the Nazis, for war crimes against humanity. And he's saying that he won't have it done because he doesn't trust me. It was unbelievable. It's because some of these guys are. So that's still up in the air whether he wants to do that, but he wants somebody more trustworthy than me. It's incredible. But
Wow. Do you think that's just paranoia on his part?
well, it's manipulativeness too. He knows he's a psychiatrist. So, with all of them, you can't get to them because they use the system. Charlie Manson and others, they use the system to get a better deal or to get out early or to get something, and so they really never submit to psychiatric genetic brain imaging tests. It's we do a lot of other ones, non-famous people, and we have data on those who are either impulsive murderers, psychopaths, or disorganized sorts of murderers, and all different patterns in the brain. And there's a different genetics to it that's implied, even though a lot is not known about the genetics of those murderers, and certainly not the dictators. But if you look at the behaviors, I knew the opposition, and through the opposition in Syria, the Assad family, I knew a lot about them, and also the pediatrician, who needs a pediatrist, get a foot in the door, and the pediatrician of Assad, and said what he had was intermittent explosive disorder. He did not have psychopathy. He's a lousy dictator, as dictators go, but he would just explode impulsively. He was not a psychopath. He's not a psychopath, even though his father and brother were. So at any rate, uh, it's hard to get the real data. So you're kind of imputing this. That is, you're guessing. You're putting together all the behavioral traits. And of course, I give talks on presidents, different politicians, to try to guess what they have. And, it's a no-no because you can't tell. And there's a thing called the Goldwater rule from 1968 with the American Psychiatric Association got fed up with people who, there was a group, and they're usually a group of Yale psychiatrists and psychologists, younger ones, who try to dissuade people from voting for certain people. It turns out they go after Republicans all the time for some reason. But it started out with Goldwater, and they put out this paper saying Goldwater was crazy and he'd blow everybody up. It was purely political. And after that, the APA says you can't do this anymore. There's none of this stuff. You have to analyze it and go through all the formalities. And so it's a real ethical breach. But if you say, look, we don't really know, but based on these, traits, these kind of line up with the psychopathy or sociopathy. And here's the key. Somebody can have these psychopathic or sociopathic traits, but if somebody's a psychopath and a sociopath, they can have the exact same behaviors, but why they're doing it is very different. And in one case, the pure psychopaths, the real psychopaths, they don't have a sense of moral reasoning. So to them, what they're doing is not immoral. They know you think it's immoral. So to them, they're not even sinning. But a sociopath, it's different. They know what they're doing is wrong. They have a sense of morality, but they're still usually really pissed off losers, and they're going to get even with the world, with specific types of people. That's a different group. So in order to do that, you have to have a really skilled expert in personality disorders to interview them and talk with them, give them tests for a couple of days to determine it. But that's never done. So any guessing as to, is this presidential candidate, is this president a psychopath? It's a pure guesswork. And also the reason why underneath is really not known because they don't get really tested.
Um,
I didn't tell you anything. Duncan, I just didn't tell you anything, did I? But I gave you the caveats.
What? No, not at all.